Maybe the most painful thing isn't getting fired, it's when someone who once called you a teammate smirks and treats your job loss like a joke. His laughter echoed through that sterile office as he watched me pack my desk, savoring every second of my humiliation. But just 1 week later, that same laughter would echo through his own downfall. And I was the one pulling the strings. $50,000 vanished from his grasp, along with the smug grin he wore that day. My name is Emily Carter, and at 32, I thought I'd finally found my stride at Brighton Solutions, a mid-sized advertising and events agency nestled in downtown Chicago. The glass building reflected the city's ambition, and for 3 years, I'd poured every ounce of my creativity and strategic thinking into making our clients' campaigns shine. Marketing wasn't just my job, it was my language, my weapon, my identity. The office atmosphere at Brighton was what you'd expect from any American corporate environment. Fluorescent lights that gave everyone a slight pallor, the constant hum of the air conditioning that never quite worked right, and the bitter smell of burnt coffee that permanently haunted the break room. But beneath this mundane surface, tension crackled like static electricity before a storm. Mark Thompson, my direct manager, was the epicenter of that tension. At 40, he carried himself with the swagger of someone who believed his MBA from a state school was equivalent to a Harvard degree. His suits were always a touch too tight, as if he'd bought them during more optimistic times and refused to acknowledge reality. Mark had this peculiar habit of running his hand through his thinning hair whenever he felt threatened, which happened more often than he'd admit. Our relationship had started professionally enough. During my first year, I'd even admired his apparent confidence and business acumen. But patterns emerged. Every successful campaign I orchestrated somehow became Mark's vision in executive meetings. The innovative social media strategy that saved our biggest client from a PR disaster? Mark presented it to the board while I sat in my cubicle, watching the company-wide email praising his quick thinking pop up on my screen. I documented everything, every idea pitched in our one-on-ones that mysteriously appeared in his presentations. Every late night I spent fixing his mistakes while he took credit for the polished final product. My colleagues knew the truth. Rachel from accounting would give me sympathetic looks when Mark strutted past my desk after another stolen victory. Tom from creative would mutter, "Unbelievable," under his breath during meetings where Mark butchered the explanation of my strategies. But I stayed strategic, professional. I believed that good work would eventually speak for itself. That's the lie we tell ourselves in corporate America, isn't it? That merit matters more than politics. The breaking point came when I discovered discrepancies in the billing for the Henderson Industries campaign. Numbers didn't add up. We were charging for services never rendered, padding invoices with phantom expenses. The trail led directly to Mark's approved signatures. When I brought it to his attention privately, thinking he'd want to correct an honest mistake, his face went through a fascinating spectrum of colors before settling on a dangerous red. "You're going to forget what you think you saw," he said, his voice low and controlled. Smart girls know when to keep their mouths shut. But I wasn't his version of smart. I documented everything and prepared to go to HR. Mark must have sensed it because 2 days later, before I could file my report, I found myself summoned to his office on a gray Tuesday morning that would change everything. The walls of his office were covered with motivational posters, the kind with soaring eagles and mountain peaks that corporate guys like Mark thought made them look inspirational. His desk was deliberately oversized, a psychological trick to make visitors feel small. Behind him, the Chicago skyline stretched out, indifferent to the small dramas playing out in its shadows. "Emily," he said, not looking up from his computer screen. "We need to talk about your future here, or should I say, your lack of one." The air in that office became thick, suffocating. This was it, the moment where 3 years of dedication crumbled into nothing, where every sacrifice I'd made for this company would be erased by a man who couldn't create an original idea if his life depended on it. "Your performance has been disappointing," Mark said, finally looking up with eyes that gleamed with barely concealed satisfaction. He pushed a thin folder across his massive desk. "Multiple client complaints, missed deadlines, and now this attitude problem. We're letting you go, effective immediately. I stared at the folder, knowing it was fabricated nonsense. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from rage so pure it felt like ice in my veins. Client complaints. Mark, I have emails from every single client praising. The decision is final. He leaned back in his leather chair. And that's when it happened. That laugh, not a chuckle, not a nervous giggle, but a full, genuine laugh that filled the room like toxic gas. You know what your problem is, Emily? You think you're too good for this place? Well, good luck finding anyone else who'll tolerate that attitude. In this economy? With your reputation? Another laugh, sharper this time. I'll be surprised if you can land a job flipping burgers. The humiliation burned through me like acid. Other employees were gathering outside the glass walls of his office, pretending to work while obviously watching the show. Mark had deliberately left the blinds open. He wanted an audience for my destruction. Security will escort you out, he continued, his voice dripping with false professionalism now that he had witnesses. You have 15 minutes to clear your desk. Any company property not returned will be deducted from your final paycheck. Which, by the way, won't include severance. Termination for cause doesn't qualify. For cause? I stood up, my voice steady despite the earthquake inside me. What cause, Mark? Not agreeing to cover up your fraud? His face darkened, but the smile never left. I'd be very careful about making accusations you can't prove, Emily. Defamation lawsuits can be expensive, especially for someone who's unemployed. 2 security guards appeared at the door, Tony and Luis, guys I'd shared coffee with every morning for 3 years. They couldn't meet my eyes as they flanked me for the walk of shame to my desk. Mark followed, making sure everyone saw, making sure everyone knew who held the power. My desk was a monument to dedication, 3 years of awards, photos from company events, a small cactus Rachel had given me last Christmas. I had 15 minutes to erase my existence from this place. My hands moved mechanically, dropping personal items into a cardboard box that felt heavier with each addition. Mark stood nearby, arms crossed, still smiling. You know, Emily, I tried to help you. I really did. But some people just don't understand how the real world works. You thought being good at your job was enough? He laughed again, quieter but somehow worse. That's adorable, really. My colleagues kept their heads down, fingers clicking on keyboards with fake urgency. Only Rachel dared to look at me, her eyes brimming with tears she couldn't shed without risking her own position. The silence was deafening except for Mark's occasional chuckle and commentary. Oh, don't forget that stapler, he said loudly. Wouldn't want to be accused of theft on top of everything else. The stapler wasn't even mine. It belonged to the company. But I put it back on the desk with deliberate calm, refusing to give him the reaction he craved. As security walked me to the elevator, Mark called out one last time. Hey, Emily. When I turned, he was grinning wider than ever. Thanks for all the great ideas. Don't worry, I'll make sure they're put to good use. The elevator doors closed on his laughter and the silent, ashamed faces of my former co-workers. In that mirrored box descending 14 floors, I saw myself clearly. Makeup smudged, eyes blazing with unshed tears, holding a pathetic cardboard box containing the remnants of 3 years of my life. The security guards walked me all the way to the street. Tony finally spoke as we reached the sidewalk. I'm sorry, Emily. This ain't right. But sorry didn't pay rent. Sorry didn't erase the humiliation. Sorry didn't silence Mark's laughter that kept echoing in my head as I stood on that Chicago street, unemployed, publicly disgraced, and burning with a rage that would soon transform into something far more dangerous, a plan. The wind whipped through the downtown corridor, carrying the sounds of the city that no longer included me. But as I walked away from Brighton Solutions, Mark's laughter still ringing in my ears, I made myself a promise. That sound would haunt him far worse than it haunted me. He just didn't know it yet. The first 3 days were the worst. My studio apartment in Uptown had never felt smaller, 400 square feet that seemed to shrink with each rejection email. The walls were thin enough to hear my neighbors' TV shows, their laughter a cruel reminder of normalcy continuing without me. I sat on my secondhand couch, laptop heating my thighs, refreshing my email every few minutes like a slot machine junkie waiting for the jackpot. Thank you for your interest, but we've decided to go with another candidate. Your qualifications are impressive, however. Each rejection felt personal. Mark's words echoed, I'll be surprised if you can land a job flipping burgers. The bastard had probably already spread word through his network. The Chicago advertising scene was smaller than people realized. Everyone knew everyone. And reputation was currency I no longer possessed. By Wednesday night, I'd graduated from wine to beer, cheaper, more sustainable for someone watching their savings account drain with terrifying speed. Miller Lite had become my companion, its metallic taste matching the bitterness coating my throat. I sat in darkness, too prideful to turn on lights and see the mess I'd become. Empty bottles lined the coffee table like soldiers fallen in battle. The worst part was the 3 a.m. wake-ups. Drenched in cold sweat, Mark's laughter playing on repeat in my mind. That sound. God, that sound. It wasn't just mockery. It was the sound of someone who knew they'd won, who took pleasure not just in victory, but in the complete destruction of another person. Thursday afternoon, I hit bottom. Literally. I'd been lying on the bathroom floor for an hour, the cool tiles against my cheek, when my phone buzzed. Another rejection. Probably. But it was Rachel. Hey, hun. Can't talk long. Mark's been bragging all week. Just landed the Whitfield Industries contract, $50K campaign. He's taking the team to Gibson's Steakhouse tomorrow to celebrate. Thought you should know. I'm so sorry. $50,000. The number cut through my fog like a blade. Mark was celebrating on the grave of my career with a contract worth $50,000. I pulled myself up, caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror. Hollow eyes, unwashed hair, 3-day-old mascara creating shadows that made me look like a ghost. This wasn't me. This broken thing wasn't Emily Carter, who'd graduated cum laude, who'd built campaigns from nothing, who'd saved Brighton's ass more times than anyone could count. That's when the fog cleared. And I saw it all, not through tears or self-pity, but with the sharp clarity that comes when rock bottom becomes a foundation instead of a grave. The Whitfield Industries contract. I knew that company. Hell, I'd done the preliminary research for that pitch 3 weeks ago, before Mark had reassigned me to other projects. Whitfield was old school, conservative, obsessed with traditional metrics and authentic engagement rates. They hated anything that smelled like inflated numbers or artificial success. And I knew something else. Mark's fatal flaw. He always padded the data. Every campaign he'd ever taken credit for had juiced numbers, inflated engagement rates, phantom impressions that looked good on paper but would crumble under real scrutiny. He'd done it with Henderson Industries, with Parker Tech, with dozens of others. I had the screenshots, the emails, the trail of digital breadcrumbs he'd been too arrogant to hide properly. I stood up slowly, my reflection sharpening into focus. The ghost was gone. In her place stood someone else, someone who understood that revenge wasn't about anger or violence or dramatic confrontations. Real revenge was surgical, precise, devastating in its simplicity. Mark thought he'd destroyed me with laughter and humiliation. He thought I'd disappear into the mass of unemployed, forgotten marketing professionals struggling to survive in Chicago's brutal job market. He thought wrong. I opened my laptop with steady hands and began making a list. Not a rambling manifesto of grievances, but a tactical assessment. Whitfield's CEO, James Whitfield, was notoriously paranoid about data fraud after being burned by a previous agency. The contract was fresh, probably still in the honeymoon phase where small doubts could cascade into full cancellation. Mark would be using my research, my strategies. But with his execution, sloppy, overconfident, vulnerable, I still had Rachel inside, along with Tom from Creative who'd texted earlier asking if I was okay. Most importantly, I had knowledge. 3 years of watching Mark operate, learning his patterns, documenting his weaknesses. The beer bottles went into recycling. The laptop moved from the couch to my small dining table. I showered, washing away 3 days of despair. And when I emerged, I was no longer a victim. I was a predator who knew her prey perfectly. Mark wanted to laugh? Fine. But he'd forgotten something crucial in his moment of triumph. The person who knows your secrets, who built your successes, who covered for your incompetence, is the last person you should ever humiliate. 1 week. I gave myself 1 week to make him understand that some laughter comes with a price tag. $50,000 seemed about right. Friday morning, I woke with purpose. The plan crystallized as I sipped black coffee. My laptop opened to multiple tabs: LinkedIn profiles, industry forums, Whitfield Industries' website, and most importantly, my archive of Brighton Solutions campaign data from the past 3 years. The beauty of revenge isn't in its violence, but in its precision. I wouldn't slash Mark's tires or post his secrets on social media like some scorned teenager. No, I would use the very system he'd manipulated to undo him. The corporate world runs on trust, reputation, and numbers. Destroy any of those pillars, and the whole structure collapses. First, I needed to understand Whitfield's pressure points. James Whitfield had given an interview to Adweek 6 months ago where he'd mentioned his company's previous disaster with an agency that had fabricated social media metrics. "Fool me once," he'd said. The article noted he'd personally hired an external audit firm to verify all marketing data moving forward. Perfect. I created a new email address, concerned professional147protonmail.com. Anonymous, untraceable, but credible sounding. Then I drafted my first move, not to Whitfield directly. That would be too obvious. Instead, I targeted Michael Torres, Whitfield's CMO, who according to LinkedIn had just joined the company 3 months ago. New executives are always paranoid about their first big decisions. The email was surgical. "Mr. Torres, congratulations on the Brighton Solutions partnership. You may want to verify the engagement metrics they've provided for their recent campaigns. A simple cross-reference with public social media analytics tools will reveal interesting discrepancies. The Henderson Industries campaign is particularly illuminating. Best regards, a concerned industry professional." I didn't send it immediately. Timing was everything. Mark would be at Gibson's Steakhouse Friday night, drinking expensive wine, believing himself untouchable. I scheduled the email for Saturday morning, when Torres would be checking his phone over weekend coffee. Guard down, mind open to doubt. Next, I contacted Danny Jai, a freelance data analyst I'd worked with before. Danny operated in the gray areas of digital marketing, the kind of guy who could verify or expose inflated metrics. "Emily, heard about Brighton. Their loss, seriously." "Thanks. Danny, listen, I need a favor." "Paid, of course. I still had enough savings for this. Can you run an audit on Brighton's recent campaigns, specifically looking for discrepancies between reported and actual engagement rates?" "That's interesting. Any particular reason?" "Let's just say I'm considering starting my own agency and want to understand the competitive landscape better." Danny laughed. "Sure. Competitive landscape. I'll have something for you by Monday." The third piece required more finesse. I called Tom from Creative, knowing he'd be at lunch, away from the office. "Emily, Jesus, are you okay? What Mark did was—" "I'm fine. Tom, actually, I'm calling with an opportunity. I'm consulting now, and I might have a lead that needs creative work, but I need to understand what Brighton's bandwidth looks like. Are you guys swamped with the Whitfield campaign?" Tom snorted. "Swamped? Mark's making us redo everything every 5 minutes. He keeps changing the numbers in the presentations. Yesterday, he literally asked me to Photoshop analytics screenshots to look more impressive. I refused, but he got one of the interns to do it. Photoshopped analytics. My God, Mark had handed me a loaded gun. "Tom, that's fraud." "I know. I'm looking for a new job myself. This place is about to implode." "Do you still have the original screenshots? The real ones?" A pause. Maybe. Why? Insurance, you should protect yourself if things go south. Yeah, you're right. I'll keep them safe. Saturday arrived gray and drizzling, matching the mood I was cultivating. I positioned myself at a coffee shop across from Brighton's building, laptop open, watching the weekend skeleton crew through the rain-streaked windows. Mark's Mercedes was in the parking garage. He often came in on Saturdays to demonstrate leadership, which really meant browsing ESPN while billing overtime. At 11 a.m., I got a text from Rachel. Something's happening. Mark just got called into an emergency video call with Whitfield. The first domino had fallen. I opened a new anonymous email account and sent my second message, this time to 3 mid-level employees at Whitfield, the ones who'd be tasked with investigating if Torres raised concerns. You might want to ask Brighton Solutions why the Henderson Industries Instagram campaign shows 47,000 engagements in their portfolio, but only 12,000 years in Instagram's native analytics. Screenshots attached for reference. I attached the real data Danny had started sending me, preliminary findings. But damning enough. By 2 p.m., Rachel texted again. Mark's been on calls all day. He's sweating through his shirt, just heard him yelling at the intern about fixing the numbers. The plan was working, but I needed one more push. I called James Whitfield's office directly, knowing I'd get voicemail on a Saturday. In my most professional voice, I left a message. Mr. Whitfield, this is Sarah Chen from Data Verify Analytics. We've been retained by a competitor to audit Brighton Solutions' recent campaigns, and we've discovered some concerning discrepancies you should be aware of before Monday's campaign launch. Please have your team contact us at your earliest convenience. There was no Sarah Chen, no Data Verify Analytics, but by the time they figured that out, they'd have found enough real problems to make the fake caller irrelevant. Sunday night, I raised a beer, craft this time, a small celebration, to the empty apartment. Tomorrow would begin the real show. Mark thought he'd ended my career with laughter and humiliation. He was about to learn that some people don't break under pressure. They become diamonds, sharp enough to cut through anything. Monday morning arrived like a storm front. I positioned myself at the same coffee shop, ordered a large dark roast, and opened my laptop to watch the destruction unfold in real time. Rachel had become my unwitting war correspondent, texting updates as Brighton Solutions descended into chaos. 7:45 a.m. Mark's already here. Saw him in the parking garage. He looked like he hadn't slept. 8:15 a.m. Emergency all-hands meeting called for 9 a.m. Never seen this before. 8:32 a.m. Whitfield's audit team just walked in. 3 people with boxes of equipment. Mark's face went white. The audit team. Whitfield had moved faster than I'd anticipated. My anonymous tips had lit a fuse that was burning quicker than expected. I pulled up Brighton's client portal. Mark had never revoked my access. Another oversight born of arrogance. I could see the Whitfield campaign materials in real time. Watch as Mark's team scrambled to adjust numbers that had already been submitted. Danny sent me another batch of data. The Henderson Industries discrepancies were just the tip. Every major campaign Mark had touched showed inflation rates between 20–40%, but the smoking gun was an internal email Danny had somehow obtained. Mark instructing the intern to adjust engagement rates for the Whitfield pitch to match competitor benchmarks. I created another anonymous email, this time from Brighton Insider 2024, and sent it to 3 major advertising trade publications. Brighton Solutions currently under emergency audit by Whitfield Industries for suspected data fraud. Sources indicate systematic inflation of metrics across multiple campaigns. Senior management aware and complicit. Documentation available upon request. Within an hour, my phone buzzed. A reporter from Adage. Is this Emily Carter? I'm following up on a tip about Brighton Solutions. Would you care to comment? I have no idea what you're talking about, I said calmly. I no longer work there. But you did until recently, under Mark Thompson? No comment. The denial would speak volumes. Reporters know that no comment from a recently terminated employee means, yes, but I can't say it legally. By noon, Rachel's texts were coming rapidly. Conference room locked for 3 hours. Can hear Mark yelling through the walls. 2 more clients just called demanding audits. Security just escorted someone from accounting out. Then, at 1:47 p.m., holy shit, Whitfield just pulled the contract. Official email just went out. Mark's been suspended pending investigation. $50,000 gone, but I wasn't done. I pulled up my archived files and found what I needed. A presentation Mark had given to the board 3 months ago, taking credit for a campaign I'd developed, the same campaign that was now under scrutiny. I forwarded it from another anonymous account to the entire Brighton board of directors with a simple note. Compare slide 14 with the actual Instagram analytics for that date range, then ask who really created this campaign. Tuesday through Thursday became a blur of strategic strikes. Each morning, I'd send another piece of evidence to someone new, a client, a journalist, a board member. Never enough to trace back to me, always enough to deepen the crisis. I learned that Whitfield wasn't just pulling their contract, they were considering legal action. 2 more major clients had suspended their campaigns pending review. Tom texted Wednesday night. Mark's been calling everyone, begging them to back up his numbers. Nobody will. We all know they're fake. The beauty was that I hadn't created any false evidence. Every document, every screenshot, every data point was real. I'd simply made sure the right people saw them at the right time. Mark had built his house on sand, and I'd just shown everyone where to look. Thursday afternoon, while sitting in the same coffee shop that had become my command center, I saw Mark exit the Brighton building carrying a cardboard box, the same type of box I'd carried a week earlier, but where I'd walked with dignity despite my humiliation. Mark stumbled, dropping papers that scattered in the wind. No one helped him gather them. His Mercedes had a parking ticket on the windshield. As he fumbled for his keys, dropping them twice, I saw his face clearly through the coffee shop window. The confident smirk was gone, replaced by something hollow, desperate. He looked like he'd aged 5 years in 5 days. Rachel called that evening. Emily, it's over. Mark's been terminated. The board found evidence he'd been falsifying data for over 2 years. The SEC might get involved because some of those clients were publicly traded. They're saying he might face fraud charges. That's unfortunate, I said neutrally. Emily, was this you? I've been job hunting all week. Rachel, I don't have time for revenge. She laughed, but it was nervous. Right, of course. Hey, the position's open now. You should apply. The board specifically asked if anyone knew how to reach you. I'll think about it. But I wouldn't. Brighton Solutions was Mark's grave, not my resurrection. I had 3 consulting offers on my desk from companies that had heard about the whistleblower who'd exposed Brighton's fraud. They couldn't prove it was me, but they suspected, and in the corporate world, being suspected of taking down a corrupt manager was better than any recommendation letter. Friday morning, exactly 1 week after Mark had laughed at my termination, I walked past Brighton Solutions one last time. Through the glass lobby, I could see them removing Mark's name from the directory. His office, that temple to his ego with its motivational posters and power desk, was being cleaned out. $50,000, his reputation, his career, maybe his freedom if the fraud charges stuck. All gone in 1 week. I didn't laugh. Laughter was Mark's weakness, not mine. I simply walked on, heels clicking on Chicago concrete, toward a future he'd tried to steal but had instead guaranteed. Friday evening found me at Murphy's Tavern, a dimly lit bar 2 blocks from Brighton Solutions where the advertising crowd gathered to celebrate wins and drown losses. I chose it deliberately, close enough that word would travel, far enough that it wouldn't seem intentional. The bourbon in my hand was top shelf, a small luxury I could afford thanks to the consulting deposit that had hit my account that morning. The bar was buzzing with the week's gossip. Mark Thompson's spectacular fall from grace had become legend in less than 5 days. Every conversation seemed to orbit around it: the audit team, the suspended contracts, the FBI fraud investigation that was now confirmed, not just rumored. $50,000 just vanished. I heard someone say from a nearby booth, Whitfield's lawyers are going scorched earth. Heard it's actually worse. Another voice chimed in. Parker Tech and Henderson are both demanding refunds. Could be close to 200 grand in total liability. 200,000. The number sent a shock of satisfaction through me that the bourbon couldn't match. Mark's house of cards hadn't just fallen, it had been incinerated. Around 8 p.m., the door opened and a familiar group walked in. Tom, Rachel, and several others from Brighton's creative team. Rachel spotted me first, her eyes widening before she whispered urgently to the others. They approached cautiously, like bomb squad members approaching an unknown package. Emily, Tom said, sliding into the seat across from me. Didn't expect to see you here. It's a free country, I replied, taking another sip. Last I checked, being unemployed doesn't ban me from bars. Rachel sat down next to Tom, her voice low. Everyone knows, Emily, not officially, but everyone knows it was you. I met her eyes steadily. Everyone knows what, exactly? That you exposed Mark, that you saved the company from a massive lawsuit. The board fired me, I interrupted. Or did everyone forget that part? Tom leaned forward. That was all, Mark. The board knows that now. They've been trying to reach you all week. Full reinstatement, back pay, probably a promotion. Not interested. The table went silent. Behind them, I could see other Brighton employees stealing glances, some hostile, others curious, most simply shocked that I dare show my face so close to the scene of the crime. You destroyed him, Rachel whispered. His wife filed for divorce yesterday. Did you know that? She found out about the fraud charges from the news. I hadn't known that. And for a moment, just a moment, I felt something that might have been regret. Then I remembered his laughter, the way he'd made sure everyone watched my humiliation, the years of stolen credit and casual cruelty. Mark destroyed himself, I said simply. I just made sure the right people noticed. The FBI contacted us today. Tom said, they want to interview everyone who worked under Mark. They'll probably call you too. I'll tell them the truth, that Mark Thompson was a fraud who built his career on other people's work and finally got caught. I finished my bourbon and stood. Good luck with the cleanup. You're going to need it. As I walked toward the door, I heard rushed footsteps behind me. I turned to find James Whitfield himself standing there, looking somewhat out of place in his $1,000 suit among the happy hour crowd. Miss Carter, he said, extending his hand. I've been looking for you. I shook it carefully. Mr. Whitfield, I wanted to thank you personally. Your, let's call them anonymous tips, saved my company from what could have been a catastrophic partnership. I don't know what you're talking about. He smiled, the kind of smile that built empires. Of course you don't. But hypothetically, if someone with inside knowledge had warned us about fraudulent practices, we'd be very interested in hiring that person. Someone with that kind of integrity and strategic thinking would be invaluable. He handed me a business card. My direct line. When you're ready to stop being anonymous, give me a call. We pay people very well to ensure our partners stay honest. As he walked away, I noticed the entire bar was watching. The Brighton employees, the random patrons, even the bartender. They'd all witnessed the James Whitfield, personally recruiting the woman who'd brought down Mark Thompson. I left the bar and walked into the Chicago night, the city lights reflecting off the lake in the distance. My phone had 17 missed calls from unknown numbers, reporters, probably, or other companies who'd heard about my consulting work. The business world loves a winner. And taking down a corrupt manager with surgical precision was better than any MBA. But the real victory wasn't the job offers or the vindication. It was knowing that somewhere in this city, Mark Thompson was sitting alone in his empty house, his wife gone, his career destroyed, his name toxic in every agency from here to New York. He'd probably had a few drinks himself tonight, staring at the walls, wondering how it had all fallen apart so quickly. Did he think about me? Did he replay that moment when he'd laughed at my termination, not knowing he was signing his own death warrant? Did he understand yet that his cruelty had awakened something far more dangerous than anger? I hoped he did. I hoped he replayed that laughter every night for the rest of his life, understanding finally that some people don't break under humiliation. They crystallize into something harder, sharper, and infinitely more dangerous. The week was over. Mark had lost everything. $50,000 was just the opening act. By the time the lawsuits and investigations were done, he'd be lucky to avoid prison. And I? I was just getting started. Saturday night, 1 week and 1 day after my termination, I found myself at Millennium Park, watching the city lights dance on the Crown Fountain. The October air was crisp, carrying hints of winter's approach. My phone buzzed with another consulting offer, the 5th this week, but I let it go to voicemail. Tonight wasn't about the future. It was about closing a chapter. I'd chosen this spot deliberately. 3 months ago, Brighton Solutions had held their summer party here. Mark had given a speech about team unity and shared success while taking credit for the quarter's wins. I remembered standing in the crowd, watching him bask in applause for my campaigns, thinking someday the truth would matter. Now it had, just not the way I'd imagined. A familiar figure approached from the shadows. Mark Thompson himself. He looked like a ghost of his former self. The expensive suit was gone, replaced by jeans and a wrinkled polo. His face was gaunt, unshaven, eyes hollowed by sleepless nights. He stopped 10 feet away, as if there was an invisible barrier between us. "I figured you'd be here," he said, his voice hoarse. "You always came here to think." I said nothing, just watched him fidget with his hands. No wedding ring anymore. I noticed. "The FBI seized my computers yesterday." He continued. "My lawyer says I'm looking at 3 to 5 years if convicted. My accounts are frozen. Miranda took the house, the kids won't talk to me, and every agency in Chicago has blacklisted me." Still, I remained silent. He didn't deserve my words. 50,000. He laughed bitterly, a broken sound, nothing like the cruel laughter from that day in his office. "You made sure I lost exactly 50,000 first. That was deliberate, wasn't it? The same number I was celebrating." "I don't know what you're talking about." "Stop." His voice cracked. "Just stop. We both know what you did. What I can't figure out is how you knew exactly where to apply pressure. It was surgical. Emily. Brilliant, actually." The compliment felt hollow coming from him. I turned to leave, but his next words stopped me. "I came here to ask why, but I know why. God, do I know why?" He sat heavily on a nearby bench, head in his hands. 3 years, 3 years of stealing your work, your ideas, your future. And then I laughed. I actually laughed while destroying your career. "Yes," I said simply, "you did." He looked up at me, and for the first time since I'd known him, I saw genuine remorse in his eyes. "I created you, didn't I? This version of you, the one who could destroy a man in a week without leaving a single fingerprint." "No, Mark, you revealed me. There's a difference. The board offered you my position." "I know. You turned it down. Brighton Solutions is poisoned ground now. Your corruption ran too deep. That company will never recover its reputation." He nodded slowly. "Whitfield wants to hire you. Among others, you'll take it. That's none of your concern anymore." We stood there in silence. 2 people who'd once shared an office suite, now separated by an ocean of consequences. In the distance, a group of young professionals laughed at something on someone's phone, bright, carefree, unaware of how quickly corporate success could become corporate catastrophe. "For what it's worth," Mark said finally, "I'm sorry. Not just because I got caught. I'm sorry for every presentation where I took credit, every late night you worked while I took glory, every moment I made you feel small. You were the best marketing mind I ever worked with, and instead of learning from you, I consumed you." The apology hung in the air between us. 6 months ago, I might have wanted to hear it. Now it was just words from a broken man trying to make sense of his downfall. Your apology doesn't give me back 3 years, I said. It doesn't erase the humiliation, the public firing, the laughter. But I don't need it to. Your destruction wasn't about making me feel better. It was about balance. Balance? You took everything from me with a laugh. I took everything from you with silence. Now we're even. I turned to walk away, then paused. Mark, a word of advice. When you get out, if you avoid prison, don't go back to marketing. Find something honest. Maybe for the first time in your life, create something instead of stealing it. Emily, wait! But I was already walking away, heels clicking on the pavement with the rhythm of closure. Behind me, Mark Thompson sat alone on a bench in the city he'd once thought he owned, surrounded by the lights of businesses he'd never work for again. My phone buzzed. James Whitfield texting. Monday morning, 9 a.m. Let's discuss your future. I smiled. Not Mark's cruel smile, not even a vindictive one. Just the quiet satisfaction of someone who'd balanced the scales with precision and walked away clean. 1 week, $50,000, one career for another. The math was perfect. Monday morning arrived crisp and bright, the Chicago skyline gleaming with promise. I stood in front of Whitfield Industries headquarters, a modern glass tower that made Brighton Solutions look like a relic. My reflection in the doors showed someone transformed. New suit, sharper than anything I'd worn before, purchased with my first consulting check. But the real change was in my eyes. They held knowledge now, the kind that comes from dancing with destruction and walking away unburned. James Whitfield's office occupied the entire 40th floor. Unlike Mark's desperate power plays with oversized furniture, Whitfield's space whispered authority, minimalist, elegant, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view that made you feel like you owned the city. Emily. He stood as I entered, genuine warmth in his handshake. Thank you for coming. Mr. Whitfield. James. Please. We're going to be working closely together. He gestured to a sitting area where coffee was already waiting. Good coffee, not the burnt offerings Brighton had served. I'll cut straight to it. I want you as our Vice President of Partnership Integrity. That's a title that doesn't exist. It does now. Created specifically for you. He leaned forward. Your job would be to audit our potential partners, investigate suspicious metrics, and ensure we never end up in bed with another Mark Thompson. The salary he mentioned was double what I'd made at Brighton. The benefits package included things I'd only dreamed of. But more than that, it was a position built on my newfound reputation as someone who could smell lies in spreadsheets and see fraud in fireworks. Why me? I asked, though I knew the answer. Because you did in 1 week what my entire legal team couldn't do in months of due diligence. You saved us from a partnership that would have damaged our reputation irreparably. And you did it without leaving fingerprints. He smiled. That kind of talent is rare. If I accept, I have conditions. Name them. Full autonomy in investigations, access to all data, all communications. If I say a partner is dirty, we walk away, no questions asked. Done. And I want to build a team. Former employees who've been burned by corrupt management. They know what to look for because they've lived it. James extended his hand. Welcome to Whitfield Industries, Emily. As I shook his hand, my phone buzzed. A news alert. Former Brighton Solutions executive Mark Thompson indicted on 15 counts of wire fraud. Below it, another. Brighton Solutions files for bankruptcy following mass client exodus. The company that had chewed me up and spit me out was gone. The man who'd laughed at my destruction was facing prison. And I was sitting in a corner office being offered more money than I'd ever dreamed of, specifically because I'd orchestrated it all. 3 months later, I'd built a team of 5, all former victims of corporate theft and manipulation, all hungry to prevent others from suffering what we had. We'd already flagged 3 potentially fraudulent partners, saving Whitfield millions. My reputation spread through Chicago's business community. Emily Carter, the woman who could see through any lie. who'd taken down Mark Thompson with surgical precision. Sometimes I'd pass Brighton's old building, now bearing a for lease sign. The company had dissolved completely, its employees scattered across the city, its name toxic in the industry. Mark's legacy had become a cautionary tale told at business schools, how one man's corruption and cruelty had triggered a cascade that destroyed everything. I heard he'd pled guilty, hoping for a reduced sentence, 2 years in minimum security. His lawyer managed. His wife had remarried already, to someone honest, I hoped. His kids had taken their mother's maiden name. But none of that mattered anymore. The rage that had fueled me for that one perfect week of destruction had transformed into something more useful. Purpose. Every fraudulent partner I exposed, every inflated metric I uncovered, every lying executive I unseated, it all balanced the scales a little more. The truth was, Mark had been right about one thing. He had created me, not the marketing professional I'd been, naive enough to believe hard work and talent were enough. He'd created something far more dangerous, someone who understood that in corporate America, revenge wasn't a dish best served cold. It was a dish best served with documentation, delivered anonymously, and seasoned with just enough truth to burn everything down. My office at Whitfield had a small cactus on the desk. Rachel had given me a new one as a congratulations gift. Next to it sat a printed email, framed like a diploma. Mark's termination notice from Brighton Solutions, dated exactly 1 week after mine. Some might call it petty to keep such a reminder. I called it motivation. Because somewhere out there, another Mark Thompson was laughing at someone's pain, stealing someone's work, destroying someone's career for sport. And when they did, there was a good chance their victim would remember the story of Emily Carter, the woman who lost everything to a laughing manager and took it all back with interest. $50,000, 1 week, one career ended, another reborn from its ashes. The math was more than perfect. It was poetic. Thank you so much for listening to this story of corporate revenge and justice served cold. I'd love to know where in the world you're listening from. Drop a comment below and let's connect. If this story of Emily's calculated revenge resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel for more tales of underdogs who refuse to stay down. And I'm curious, what would you have done in Emily's position? Share your thoughts in the comments. Remember, sometimes the best revenge isn't just living well, it's making sure those who wronged you can't wrong anyone else ever again.